Good morning, everyone. It's well past ridiculous, and we're seeking a sentiomentium. There's been all kinds of things going on in the world the last little while, all kinds of energetic changes, people's attitudes changing, people waking up, people who've never seen any of this stuff before, all of a sudden seeing it, and it's wonderful to see. It's wonderful to hear about. I see a lot of posts about it on Facebook. I know Facebook is evil and nasty and horrible and ugly and all that sort of mean, nasty, ugly, horrible stuff. But it's a good source of news and a barometer as to where people are at, where their attitudes are at. So although I don't participate a lot, I do get in there and I do read quite a bit of stuff on there and keep my finger on the pulse, so to say. The one thing that's come up a lot, it came up a little bit in the pre-show discussion as well, is coping mechanisms. What do you do when you wake up? What happens? What can you look forward to? What sort of things can you do to get through when you actually finally realize that you've been lied to your entire life and everything that you know is probably not quite the way it actually is? This definitely throws a lot of people for a loop. I woke up kind of slowly because Carl and I both did that, and so we sort of built coping mechanisms as we went along because it wasn't a big huge shock. But lately, like people that are getting this stuff now, they're going from completely asleep, have no idea, to have a pretty clear understanding of what's happening in a week or 2 weeks. And I think coping mechanisms, coping strategies are relatively important in something like that. I'm happy to say Carl's back with us after his little tour. Welcome back, Carl.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm only back in Canada, but didn't really leave the show until last week, which was a bit of a problem for me to get on board. So I missed that one. Sorry, folks. I think lots of people have found out the reason why there was a little trip away. Again, using Facebook, the den of evil. But yeah, I'm glad to be back on the show, and hopefully we've got lots of guests coming in and lots of good stuff we can talk about. And just to follow on a little bit about your coping mechanisms, once people wake up, there are so many different levels of actually waking up, as you well know too, and what it is that you wake up into, which field, let's say, that you wake up into, and your stages of grief process, as they refer to it, can be either very fast, very intense, or very slow, again, depending on where you wake up. Typically, the fields that we delved into with the systems of slavery and control and so on, that wake-up process, I think, was a little bit angry, because you realize what's been done, how it's been done, and how you're being controlled and treated as a slave, in essence, without your knowledge. And that, I think you can become pretty angry when you realize that. As far as the other awakenings go, those you could refer to as new agey, and your status as a human or as a higher being. I think people realize that is a thing. How we interact with each other, how we feel about each other, how we feel about ourselves, all of that's changing too. And you do operate in a completely different fashion once you also go through that process. And it's not all one, because you and I, we went through in the early stages just the slavery, the money, the freeman style of knowledge acquisition, which took us along different lines. And I think later on, we've now also reached that more personal ascension, those awakenings to how we should operate and how we should deal with ourselves and other people. And that's the kind of stuff that we really want to pass on to everybody else as well. Because if they don't already know it, or if they are now awakening to it, then we can help because we've kind of gone through it, and they may need help, and I'm happy to give it.
Well, I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can actually have the spiritual awakening without having the 3D awakening as well. Certainly, it can come first, but there's going to come a time when you realize that everything you've been through for your entire life has been a complete garbage, complete lie, complete bullshit, and yeah, a lot of people lose it. They you know, even with the Freeman folk that I trained for years ago, it was really hard to get them past the anger. And you have to simply just, well, I don't want to use the phrase just simply accept it, but that's more or less what you have to do. You have to realize that, yes, you have been lied to, and there's nothing you can do about it except move on. And that's it. That's all you can do about it. You can yell and scream and stomp your feet and throw things and blow people up and you know, cause all kinds of problems, but you're not going to get anywhere with that. The only way to get anywhere, as we'll have Mark on, I see him in here today, and he's got some really good news. We'll have him on in a little while, but he can attest to this because he went through that. He saw that anger didn't work. Anger simply gave more energy to the problems that you're trying to solve and made them larger and larger constantly. Every time you get mad, they just came back bigger, and you could never get through it. As soon as he stepped back, took a breath, went, okay, I'm not going to get angry anymore. I'm just not going to play. Then things started to work for him. And I've noticed that in my life. I know, Carl, that's basically how yours turned around as soon as you let go. And,
yeah.
And just said, okay, yes, it happened, deal with it. We're moving on from this point. Then things started to flow properly, or a little more properly. And the more you do it, the more you live in that flow, the easier it gets, and the more, well, for another term, synchronistic your life becomes. Things just fall into place. Anne brought that up. How, you know, in one sense, with the energies right now, it's awesome. Like watching this stuff play out is phenomenal. This has never been done before. It's never happened like this before, and it's kind of every day is kind of a new day. But there's also that feeling of, you know, why bother? Because none of it really matters. Nobody's going to care at the end of the day. And, you know, this is where I'm at right now. And I'm kind of struggling with it because I do have things I need to do. Previous commitments, commitments I've made that travel into the future. And some of them just don't feel as important as they did 6 months ago.
I agree with you. Yeah, I really do.
I know I'm not the only one that feels like this, because I talk to lots of people and listen to their stories, and everybody's in the same boat. So and it's not apathy. Okay, I'm not talking about apathy, because when work needs to get done and there's a purpose to it, I do it. It gets done. This is a realization that the mundane day-to-day garbage that we typically go through, that we're all so used to going through, has no purpose. It has no meaning anymore. And
exactly.
we're all in in a place where we're learning a new way. Now, whether that's a new way of nutrition, a new way of medicine, a new way of agriculture, a new way of dealing with your children, it's a new way. And like I mentioned earlier, this has never been done before. So there isn't a guidebook. There's only the experiences of people that have gone through it, which, yes, in some cases it's not going to apply to you. Some cases it may. But get a number of different perspectives. Talk to a number of people who have been living this. If you're having serious issues with this, if you get up in the morning and you just go, I just don't care anymore, and it bothers you, talk to people who have done it. Talk to people who have been through this, who have lived it already, and see how they're coping, see where their perspective is at, so that you can build. I mean, we've talked about perspectives a number of times over the shows, and to have a number of perspectives will help you formulate your own plan with a lot more detail, with a lot more clarity, and a lot less questions. Because there's tons of questions. There's lots of people out there just asking questions like, what is going on? What is this? What's happening to me? And most people, there's a lot of people out there who simply can't give them an answer. And I mean, I can't say definitively, you're going through this, this is what's going to happen, and this is why it's happening to you. All I can say is, this seems to be similar to something I went through. Here's what happened to me. Your results may vary. And everybody's going to have their own unique experience. So as far as coping skills, the easiest way I can explain the coping skills is to let go. Don't try to control it. Don't try to force it. When something comes into your sphere, into your awareness, into your ability to interact with it, then do so. If it doesn't, it's probably not going to. Everything that I've tried in the last 5 or 6 years anyway, that I've tried to make happen, failed miserably. Everything that I've allowed to come in and allowed to happen worked beautifully. And it's a hard thing for a lot of people to do, because in a lot of cases we're taught you got to make your own happiness. You have to if you want it, you got to go get it. It's not coming to you. But that's not what's happening anymore. It is coming to you. Now, it may not be coming in a way that you want or the way you expect, but you're going to get it. If you want to be rich, chances are it's not going to happen. You're going to be sufficient. Anne spoke about this a little while, earlier before the show, that for a significant amount of time she has had enough, and be satisfied with enough, because what more do you need? In many of the tribes in Africa, the ancient tribes of Africa, if you have more than you need, you're considered mentally ill, because what's the point? Why would you need 5 houses? You can only live in one. Why would you need 3 cars? You can only drive one. Doesn't make sense when you really look at it from a logical, straightforward standpoint. And, granted, I can get it. I can see if you have a purpose for a car and a truck and a motorcycle, and they all have a purpose and they all have a reason for being, then by all means have them. I'm not going to say don't. But if to simply have it because you can, that's an issue. To simply make it happen because you can is an issue, because you're looking for things outside of your requirements. And at this time, right now, what I see is people who are living within their requirements, not more, not less. They have what they need when they need it. These people are the calmest, the happiest, the least stressful people that I've talked to. The ones that are constantly striving are stressed out and nothing is working for them. I don't know nobody in my sphere who is pushing the system, pushing to get more, is actually getting there. Does that make sense to you, Carl?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I just wanted to just pop back a little bit to the initial bit where people are getting to the point where they just don't care. And I actually put in the chat box there a little link to Jim Carrey, the comedian. And I don't know how many people have seen it, but I decided to watch it because I was interested in how he seems to be developing as a human rather than an actor. And the stuff that he said in this particular interview was huge. And I had to watch the interviewer. There's a young lady that's interviewing him, and she was just, I mean, just look at her. Her face was, she is the bot. She is part of the system. She could not get or understand what he was saying. But of course, when we watch it, we can, because that was his message. This is irrelevant. This is the least important thing in the world right now. And I just don't care. I don't care because I'm just energy. I have no stake in this. And that was his statement. And I just thought it was wonderful because it was coming from somebody who is in that position of being an icon and being famous and having money. And there are more and more people that are actually doing that. And yeah, we spoke before the show about how our focuses are changing. It's not about the desire to make money anymore. Instead of us have woken up, don't give a shit about it. Yes, unfortunately we tend to need it because that's the way the system's set up. But it's not the desire to become rich anymore. It's only the requirement to have what we need to survive. The focus is very definitely changing. And me personally, my focus has very definitely changed over the last, 6 weeks or so. In a very drastic way, which is something I will go into, I think, in another show. But, there are those that do know, and that has become my focus. And that's where I think most people need to move to now. Don't focus on the past. Don't try and stay attached to something that you no longer need or should be attached to. Look forward, don't look back, or look to the now and see what you have, see where you can go with what you have, and just go for the joy, go for the happiness, go for the love, go for all of the positive emotions that you possibly can in your life. Because sticking with the status quo, sticking with making do in your personal life, not monetarily, not making any changes because of fear, these are all things that are limiting who we are. So remove those. Stop living in the fear. Don't let fear keep control of you. I mean, I've been saying this for weeks. You and I have both been saying this. Lose the fear. Gain the intelligence, gain the knowledge that you need. Find somebody, or let them find you, who can bring out the best in you, bring out your joy, bring out the love, bring out everything that you need in life. And then grab on with both hands and hold tight and go for the ride, because there's no better time than now. There's no better time than now.
Well, you're going to have to. Now is not going to let you go and play the game. That's what we're seeing with all of these people, just random people from all walks of life, all of a sudden just getting it. The now is not letting you sit on your hands, and it's not letting you play the game the way you used to play it. this letting go idea, I know I'm probably going to get some hate mail over this, but lots of people, you know, they're really stressed about their family. They're really stressed about their kids. They're really stressed about what we typically would call our close associations. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to have a special affinity for your children or a special affinity for your spouse or some other significant other, but realize we're all family. And at the end of the day, it's not going to matter whether it was your child or some random guy down the street. It's all the same thing. I can't. I just lost where I was going to go with that.
I think I've got an idea. The family is who you choose, not who you're born to. And an association with a family is not a bad thing, but there's a point that your children, for instance, or even your parents, certainly when I left home, well, I finished school at 15. So I was out working before I was 16 years old. And I acted as an adult at 16 years old. And I was working. I was kind of living a separate life until I actually met my wife at 20. And then I moved. I moved out, got my own house. And then that family became the focus of my attention. The family I'd just, been brought up with, my sisters, my parents, they were still a part of who I was, and I'm still part of that family, but they weren't the most important thing in my life anymore. I would be there if they needed me, and hopefully the other way around. But my attention had shifted, and that's what I'm experiencing over and over in my life. But I'm also seeing that some people are not shifting that focus. They're holding on to things, and mothers, unfortunately, are a prime example of that. They're holding on to the past. They're holding on to the children when they're not children anymore. They're adults. And they have their own family. They have their own lives. That maybe even living in different parts of the world. And they're still trying to be and treat them as their children, that they are obligated, obliged, feel duty bound to take care of. That stopped when they left home, really. It's every person, every man and woman is responsible for themselves, and they're responsible for their happiness. And yes, to share with that with somebody else is the most wonderful thing that you can ever experience. To truly share it. And that then becomes the focus of your life. They become the focus of your life. We should never stay attached to the things that are going to be holding us back or are going to be a detriment in our lives. And what's happening right now is I believe there is a very, very definite shift for the people, everybody, to now focus on themselves, not be, this isn't, a selfish concept. This isn't being greedy about things. This is literally a point in their lives where they must become the best that they can be, which means they have to make critical decisions in their lives that moves them away from the past and from duties and obligations that are not serving them. And it's not just now, it's a process that's been taking place. I've observed it for a number of years. Now I understand it a lot more fully than I did then, and even as recently as 6 months ago. But it is a process that's taking place, and some people don't understand it. Some people don't get it. but it is happening. And the drive now, I believe, is for people to find true happiness, to exist in a life without the weight of the world and the programming that makes us, dive into consumerism or dive into the desire to make money and buy lots of houses and all the things that you just noticed and mentioned. So, I think I agreed with what you were saying, and that was my take on it. Whether people think that's the same or not, I guess is based on their own state of mind at this moment in time, because many people, even in my own life, still think that the most important thing to them is their family. But they already have a family. They have a new family, not the one they came from. That's not the most important thing in their life anymore, but they still think it is. So, yeah, I don't know if anybody has any other comments on that one. If you have comments, John.
Well, I mean, yeah, that's more or less where I was going with that. And, even the stuff that serves is not a permanent thing. It's eventually going to not serve. Let it go, move on. Don't freak out about it. I had this discussion with a lady years ago about dogs. And when one of her dogs died, she was a mess for months. And what I couldn't grasp, talking to her about it, trying to see her point of view from that, is why she couldn't be happy and be in joy for the time she had, because it's all finite, rather than spending so much time after the fact complaining and feeling sorry about loss. I just don't get it. It doesn't compute in my brain, because I know that it's finite. Like my dog Ruff, he's 5.5 years old now. He's got about we might get another 5 out of him. That's his normal lifespan. He might go a little longer, he might go a little bit less, but I know it's coming. I know it's eventually going to end. At that point, yes, I'll miss him, but I'm not going to wallow in, oh, my dog's gone. I'm going to be really happy that I had those 10 years with such a wonderful companion, and look forward to the next wonderful companion that'll come into my life. I know, yes, that's kind of extreme, and it's contentious. I realize that. But it applies. I
don't think it is, John. I don't think it is.
Well, some folks are not going to be happy.
I've actually been happy.
Yeah, there's a lot of folks that are not going to want to look at it that way. And that's why I mean,
yeah, no, I agree. And that's because they're living in the past. They're focusing on, how things used to be.
Yep.
I get what you say, and it's exactly what I've been saying in discussions with other people over the last few months, several months actually, because we really have to get to the point where, we understand that our interactions are fleeting. We have friends that we meet, acquaintances, and they come and go in our lives, or they just come and then go and we never see them again. They may be profound meetings. Then there are those that are friendships that last long, and then there are relationships. But each one, we have to accept that there is probably a finite life to those. And even the greatest relationships that we have, that culminate in a marriage and, the beginning of a new family, there's the potential that those are only a finite life. And to accept that when it reaches the end, do we break down and do we fall apart and we crash and burn? Or do we accept the fact that we just, you know, had a wonderful experience and then we move on to the next? And now you put it in the case of pets. I've upped that and I've gone to actual people. And it's my belief that we have to look at things that way. And it's not that we don't love these people and that we don't care for these people. It's just that we no longer fall into the programming of the sorrow and of the grief and the loss and everything else that goes along with that. We just focus on the positive and remember how good things were. And realistically, if things weren't good, then we shouldn't be in those relationships anyway. That we should realize and get out of them fast. So, yeah, I mean, I get exactly what you were saying and up the ante, because I don't just think of that as, you know, in the case of pets. I think that in the case of all of our relationships, you know, humans all the way down. And I think things would be a lot better. There would be a lot less animosity if we dealt with that and comprehended that that's, I think, where we should be operating from. Just all the time love and acceptance and acknowledging the fact that all relationships are transitory and that eventually they're no more. And that could be just through the change of circumstances happened with me recently, or it could be through the loss through death of one or the other. Yeah,
and as a disclaimer,
does your life end at that point?
That's right. As a disclaimer, we are talking about the 3D video game we all find ourselves playing at this time. On the other side, in the energetic, there is permanence because the energy is always. And you can have a permanent relationship at that point. Up until the time when they go, well, I'm going to go and experience humanity. I'm going to go be a tree for 100 years. I'll see you in a little while. But it's what we're discussing, you know, coping mechanisms, how to deal with the here and now, how to deal with having feet and toenails and hair and walking on the ground, feeding yourself and having creatures around you that you interact with, right? Not the energetic side of this. But yes, yeah. I mean, I look at it with people and death and that as well. And a lot of people, they think I'm a heartless, cruel, unfeeling slob. But my perspective is different, because I see it as the character in the video game has gone back and is now more, right? They went home. They're not playing the game anymore. They're not gone. They're just not here. And so they're really, I really don't get the loss. This, I went through this. The first person, my friend Tony, he died, would have been about 26, I think, was the first time I experienced someone around me actually dying. And what went through my head was, he's gone home, his problems are over. There was no grief. There was a profound gratitude for the 7 or 8 years that I got to spend with him, for his smile, his laughter, his jokes, his help, his need, because there's lots of times when I was able to help him. And I loved it. I enjoyed it. But he's gone home. He's did his time. He's no longer in this prison anymore. And that's awesome. That's a wonderful thing. Nobody could understand it. So I tried really hard not even to bring it up, because all of the other people that were around me were devastated. And there was nothing I could do to help them, because they wanted to be devastated. They didn't want to see it from another point of view. we're getting to the point now with the energetics.
That was my point exactly as well, John.
Yep.
My point exactly.
We're getting to the point now where you don't have the choice. You have to look at it from the other point of view. It may just be something simple, but everyone on the call, everyone I know, lots of people I don't know that I see out there are being slapped in the face with this, right? You can't have this anymore. It's gone. It's out of your life. Deal with it. And the universe just says, you're done. You're finished. You're not going to have that anymore. And they have to make a choice. They have to choose to either wallow in self-pity and misery or go, well, that was wonderful. It was cool while it lasted. What's next? I'll bet you it's going to be better. And anybody that looks at it from that perspective, what usually comes into their life after that is heads and shoulders above what they used to have. People that wallow in it, they stay there. And it becomes a pattern. It becomes something that they simply cannot let go of. And there's I know lots of people who they doesn't matter how hard they try, they can't see the bright side of that equation. They can't see how that could be beneficial. It's all bad. It's all horrible. It's all miserable. And they just live that way. It's really sad. They're going to get to a point where it's going to either remove them from the game, or they're going to have an occurrence or a sentence. They'll overhear a conversation. Something will happen that'll spark that in them, and they'll go, wait a minute, I've been doing it wrong. I need to rethink this. And as far as coping skills, we're all going through this. No one is immune from this. So as far as coping skills go, I think the easiest advice I could give everybody is to simply, when it does happen, step back and broaden your perspective. Try to see it from the largest possible picture that you can. Don't focus on the minutia. Focus on the majority of the tapestry that is your experience, and how that all fits in with that tapestry. Diapause? What is diapause, Tara? Is that like menopause? It's the second time you go through it?
I'm going to have to look that one up.
Yeah, I think I am too.
Yeah. I like to think that because of where we're at right now, I mean, we're bringing up subjects that people don't like to touch on, because you were in that situation where, luckily for you, you felt this many years ago, and you understood that, that the life we were living is finite and transitory, and we should just enjoy it and enjoy who comes into our lives for the time and the period that they do. And once they move on, then you move on. Unfortunately, a lot of people, as you've just mentioned, they stay and they wallow in their sorrow. And they can't get over the fact that what was is no longer. And their lives spiral typically and go out of control. Things get very bad for them until they either realize themselves, or, well, typically even then it's a realization themselves, because they see somebody else that may have gone through the same thing as them, but then come out the other side, and as you correctly and rightly said, their life turned around and was even better than it was before. And very rarely does it go the other way.
And by better, I don't mean you get more stuff. By better, I mean you don't worry about it. You don't have the stress. You don't have the concerns, the daily, I can't sleep because of this stuff in your life anymore. Things just flow. When you need it, it's there. When you don't need it, that doesn't even come into your awareness. It's just, what?
Yeah, what
Go ahead.
one of the messages that's come up to me definitely several years now, and I've seen it lots and lots, and I'm sure other people have too, is lose the connection, lose the attachment to the property. And property can mean so many different things, but lose those attachments that don't serve you anymore. And if a piece of, I don't know, stuff that you happen to own doesn't serve you anymore and you don't need it anymore, then either give it away, or if you feel so inclined, sell it. If there's anything of any value, if you don't need it and it's taking up space, then why not do that? Unfortunately, there are lots of people, TV shows about the whole thing, about hoarders that just hoard stuff because there's an emotional attachment to everything that they have. And it's the emotions, it's the attachments, it's the memories, the painful memories a lot of the time associated with these things that turn them into hoarders and turn their lives into downward spirals in many ways, because they can't seem to just move. So the coping mechanisms are being forced on us, as you said as well, because whether you believe it or not, it seems to me there is some very definite energetics going on that are forcing changes in how people behave, what we must do to cope with those changes. And it's happening more rapidly now than ever before. So the coping mechanisms that you talk about require us to focus. I mean, many people don't know how to do it, and I'm learning all the time. We all are. But I'm getting the feeling that we must concentrate on living the life as a higher being, as a a loving being, a more accepting being, a more calm, peaceful, all of these things that make life that much nicer for you, for everybody else around you.
Yeah, I think also one of the things that's kind of I don't know. I need to think about this a little bit more. But I think one of the things that is getting in the way is on the energetic side. Everything is transitory. It's permanent, but it's always changing, and you're always a nomad. There's no little white house with a picket fence and a garden in the back in the energetics. And I haven't had the luxury of permanence in my life. We don't have a family plot of land. We don't have, my family home doesn't exist since the early 70s. It's been just one place after another since the early 70s for me. And one of the things that's still difficult for me is I'd like that permanence. I'd like to have a place that I know is always going to be there. And for me, I have to move that into what's always going to be there is the energetic. Because in this video game, on this planet, it's just, as far as my experience goes, it's just not going to happen. I don't know where I'm going to be next week. I don't even know if I'm going to be here next week. And the stuff. Carl mentioned the stuff. Your stuff is always changing. What you have now is different from what you had when you were 20, or what you're going to have when you're 40, depending upon how old you are now. So, yeah, you got to get used to that fluid nature of the coming existence, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we'll all be transients and living out of a backpack, but we're going to have, I think we're going to get to a point where we were sort of introduced to this kind of a life with the TV program Star Trek, where the people who the actors, the characters on Star Trek, particularly Next Generation and Voyager, it really came out clear on those. Their personal possessions was a little box, and it was the couple of incredibly important things that really meant something to them, and everything else was just there. It was available when they needed it, and when they didn't need it, they never bothered to go get it. I think that's kind of where we're moving on with this as far as 3D life is concerned, which is cool, awesome. But you're not going to have a family plot of land. You're not going to always have that same house, the house you grew up in when you're 50 years old. Chances are you're not going to go back to the same house you grew up in, and it's still going to be part of within your family, within your scope. It may not even exist anymore. The way we're building things these days, 50 years out of a house is soon not going to happen. Planned obsolescence is ridiculous. We were discussing this with cars on another program about planned obsolescence, and we could make a car that'll run for 1 million miles, last for 35, 40, 50 years. We won't, because there's no profit in it. And once monies go away, that's going to change, because then you'll be making the best you can make, not the cheapest you can make, which is a whole other topic, a whole other discussion. I kind of want to move on with this, because we're sort of talking in circles now. We've got our point out. If anybody wants to bring this up, if anybody's having issues with this, throw it in the Sentiomentium chat on Discord, and if necessary, we'll put another room up, or we'll even have another show. If enough questions come up and enough people are talking about this and are asking for assistance or perspective on this, we'll even have another show dedicated to this. So moving on, I got a call from Mark. Folks out here, they probably recognize Mark. He's been on a couple of times. He's a fellow in England who, for several years now, has been struggling with some legal issues, and nothing that he did, it's all been thrown at him. And from what information I got, he is essentially correct. They're trying to get him to do something that he doesn't want to do, that he doesn't have to do, and get out of contracts and agreements that they have. Is he still here? I see a Mark in the room. I can't tell if that's the same Mark or not.
Yes, he's there, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got a hold of me earlier in the week, and was really excited, him and his partner. And we had a little short discussion, and they've had a very interesting development happen in this matter, and I'd like to go into it in detail, because there's a lot of fine points. There's a lot of little things that people should be looking at that'll clarify a lot of questions before you even realize you have the question to ask. And it could take us a little while to go through that. There's going to be questions. I know the people in the chat are going to have questions. They're going to go, well, how did that work? How did that happen? Bring them out. We want to discuss this stuff, because what Mark has experienced firsthand in his eyes, in his life, is nothing short of phenomenal. It's rare anybody gets to experience this. And it's not just with the courts and the judges. This same thing goes with anybody who assumes authority. And the process is essentially the same with anybody who assumes authority. And unless you allow them to have that authority, they don't have it. So, Mark, you want to come out and maybe give a little background, talk to the folks and tell us how you got to this point. I know we're rehashing it or talking about it again, but we got some new people in here, and they may not be caught up with the shows.
Hi there.
Hey, Mark, how you doing today?
Hey, Mark.
Hi, Carl, John, everybody. Oh,
And the phone rings.
That was nicely timed.
oh, don't you just... right, I'll just mute this. Right, so sorry about that. I do apologise. Yeah. Listening to the show, and you're talking about coping mechanisms, and I, for one, you know, my background, you know, I go feet first and questions later. But as you was quite right in saying, you know, you don't get nowhere with them. You're just feeding the fire for them to blow, you know, to blow all over you. Now, I stepped back and I did some research on how to get out of this problem, because deep down inside, as like Carl was saying, there is a change in me, and I can feel this change, and something had to happen. And to make these people in authority to realise that, well, I'm no pushover, I had to come up with a different plan. So I did a bit of research, and the research is it does work. Well, anyway, it was corporate companies flexing their corporate muscles, even government flexing their muscle, you know, for the little bloke just to turn away or go and, you know, they throw a stick, we'll go and fetch it for them. Well, I'm not rolling over or fetching a stick for anybody. So this got into the courts. We'll threaten you with the courts. Well, crack on then. Not really bothered. And I did a lot of research. Then somebody on the show came up to a link of mine on the internet and said, look, you know, I've got a show that you might be, just totally off the cuff. And I downloaded this and met Carl and John. I discussed quite in depth what was going on. We've been fighting this case for 3.5 years. And stress, oh, Christ. You know, sometimes you just want to give up. But something was telling us, me and Lisa, that you just can't give up on this. We are right. On several occasions, we could have given up and just walked away from it. But I said, no, there's something not right with this, because all the evidence that they were throwing at us didn't add up. Basically, lies. So we fought it. Well, John and Cole can fill you in with the in-depth stuff. But I was hoping last week, before we went into the courts, that we'd have a quick chat before this Wednesday just gone by. And of course, you know, it wasn't on. So I said, never mind, right, we're going to go in. Excuse me a minute. Yeah, we're not, right, we're going to go in. Well, as soon as I walk them doors, walking through security, they're on me. The claimants, they are on me. And these are big corporate companies. You know, I mean, they've got money coming out their ears. But, you know, as we were saying earlier on, money isn't everything, you know. So straight away, they tried to intimidate me because snap. And as soon as I did, if I did, that would give the whole game away. I mean, they would have thrown everything on me. Now, this guy came right up into my face. I said, go away. Don't bother me. Try to serve me some papers. But if I accepted them papers, I'm in contract with it. Now, we walked through this other door and we went and booked. Well, we didn't go and book in. We just went by this desk. And anyway, our Lisa said to us, oh, we've got to go the administration and part. So I said, okay, then. Well, did I let go on them in there? Now, the thing is, if you write any letters to courts or, you know, the claimants, solicitors or whatever, they have to reply. If they don't want to reply, if I fully understand it, John, if they don't want to give you that information, as John was saying to me, it creates an estoppel. So, of course, all this new information's feeding it through me, and I'm looking on the internet to find out what this is all about. And by Christ, did I find out. So I went prepared into this court. Now, their administration system, I laid timber, I laid right into them, thinking what you've done is unlawful and you can't do this, but they're all in it. Everything we knew there and then, look, by the look of the court staff faces, the ushers, the clerks, the whole lot, they're all in it, and they knew about our case. Now, this is the important bit. They called out our names. Is Mark Quayle? He said my name wrong anyway. Is Mark Quayle or Lisa Vickers here? Well, we didn't answer, although we were standing right next to him. Is Mark Quayle or Lisa Vickers there? It's his face what I saw. And Lisa put up a birth certificate. So says, well, you know, if you want Mark Quayle and Lisa Vickers, they're here, right? Showing this piece of paper, birth certificates.
I can see where this is going.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And this clerk turned round and he says, well, that's not me. That's a bit of paper. Then Lisa says, well, we're not consenting to your legal name, the government's claim, which is in all uppercase. Well, he says, he started to get irate. So we just laid straight into him. He says, well, no. So and he says, well, who are you? Lisa says, I'm Lisa and this is Mark. Right? He said, well, that's not good to me. I can't put it down on this paper. Basically, he was trying to contract with us. Straight away. Now, this is the great bit. This is their barrister, who lied out of her back teeth and so forth throughout the whole case and the previous hearing the first part of the hearing. Well, she tried to serve me these papers again. It didn't quite work. They fell all over the floor. And she went with it. I didn't harm her or anything. Believe you me, I did. Just the paperwork went out there. I said, I'm not contracting to you. End of story. So go away and leave us alone. We'll see you in the courtroom. Anyway, I've got security guard with us now. So I'm laughing at the security. I'm thinking, what are you lot going to do? Well, they can't harm you. They can't touch you or anything because I'd already established common law jurisdiction as soon as I went into the court to the bailiffs and the court security. So they knew exactly they had to uphold the protection between people and their property as common law. Well, anyway, the usher came down and it come by about 2 whereas meant to be in there at 2 o'clock. And this guy came down and the people that are in for the case of what number it was, please follow me. So we walked with her because we actually said to the usher, the clerk, that we don't need to be introduced. We can introduce us at the door. Now, there's a valid point there as well, because when you're outside of a courtroom by the door, it's common law jurisdiction. And inside the court, it's maritime admiralty. But where is the other one? Oh, where they sit.
Hello.
And in the public gallery, it's common law jurisdiction. But what they did, John and Carl and everybody else, is they tried to get us to walk through these double doors straight into their court, into maritime admiralty side of it. So as soon as we walked in, we'd be under their jurisdiction. But we stood at the door. And as we stood at the door, he's looking at us, the judge and all that lot. We warned them. We warned them what was going to go off. But the biggest factor is it's having the guts to do it, having the guts to face the judge. And we knew that the judge was a liar. He'd lied in his draft judgment. I actually said that to him. That's coming in a minute, because that's funny. So when we're at the door, we say, you know, there's this little script that we went down off, you know, before we enter this court, you know, we claim common law jurisdiction, you know, and so forth, and inalienable rights. Do we have an accord? The judge says no. I said, pardon? I said, you've got to establish. And he's going on, and I said, what else, at least, what does he say?
So we have a lawful right to establish jurisdiction.
Yeah, we have a lawful right to establish jurisdiction. And he says, this is the truth. I couldn't believe he said it. It's on record anyway. He actually said, you haven't got no lawful rights. Well, I was nearly gobsmacked. This is what he said, you have no law. Oh, really? Well, that's when I stepped it up a bit more. What was said after that, Lise?
You lied in your draft.
Yeah, I turned round and says, right, on the 28th of April, at 10 a.m. in the morning, on the first part of this hearing, on 2017, on the 28th of April, you lied in the courtroom, and you lied in your draft judgment, and I called him a liar. He knew exactly what I was going to do then, because all this hearing was behind closed doors, which was totally unlawful anyway. It's void. It's a nullity. So what's he saying to you next?
He shouted at me. I told him not to.
Oh, yeah. He shouted at Lisa, don't you dare shout at me, telling the judge off. Then he says, look, Mark, then he did the nicey bit.
I'm not having any of this nonsense.
He says, I'm having, you know, just get your asses in here. I went, well, I'm not going to do that until we get jurisdiction, until we establish jurisdiction, because you have to establish jurisdiction on for and on the record. And he knew he couldn't do it, because as soon as you challenge it, it's the quickest way to get a case thrown out, because you have to prove it on record. Well, they can't prove, or they don't want to admit maritime law. So anyway, what's he say then, Lise?
He just said that if you don't come in, I'm going to shut the door.
Oh, right. He said, if you don't come in, I'm just going to shut the door and hand down judgment. Well, Lisa says we have a lawful right to find out what what jurisdiction we're in. And he says, well, obviously you have no lawful rights. Well, again, I'll laugh. And he said, I do not recognise common law jurisdiction. Well, common law, I said, is the very foundation of our law. Right? It's the Magna Carta. You know, we spread it all, to tell you the truth. We're not coming into your admiralty jurisdiction. By this time, the judge was on fire. Then all he says, if you don't come in, I'm going to have to the next stage. I said, so what's that then, sir? He says, I'm going to have to have you for contempt of court. Just remember, we're not actually in the court. We're in a common law jurisdiction. We're at the door. And I says, well, you can't do that because we're in jurisdiction here. If it was contempt of court, would that be civil or criminal? He was steaming by then. Then I said, he stood up, he looked at me, fuming, stood up, bowed and walked off. Straight away, what we did, I said to Lisa, get in there, where's that script bit? I said, right, abandoned ship. The judges jumped up, man overboard. That was it. The judge has abandoned ship. We take the court and the highest sovereign authority, the case dismissed against Mark and Lisa, end of. And we were coming out there. All the barristers and everybody else in the courtroom, it never happened in this courtroom before. And they were absolutely gobsmacked. You see, because then we walked outside and I went, I've not finished this. Went back into the door, opened the door and said to their barristers and their claimants and that lot, I said, that's how it's done. I'll see you later. And that's about it. So what we did, all of 12 minutes, but that 12 minutes was like a blink of an eye. We couldn't believe we'd actually done it. But as I said before, that what you've got to do is that once you see what you've researched and it's there in front of you, all you have to do is have the guts to do it. Because I actually questioned it before we actually walked through that door. Well, we didn't walk through the door. You know, it's like a double door thing it was. And most importantly, we had live witnesses with us. So they witnessed everything as well. So if they come back to us saying, oh, this never happened, I've got my live witnesses. This is exactly what happened. We close the case and that's it. He abandoned ship. But that's the hardest thing for a court. And I actually is for the courts or anybody within the legal system admit maritime law. Because I said to him, right, this was funny as hell. I says, where's the sea on the land?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we left, we went and had a cup of coffee, calmed down and so forth, and just couldn't believe what we just done, but we did it and it worked. And we came home, and well, it's now Sunday. That was on Wednesday afternoon. Think from anybody. And there you go.
Yeah. Now you could actually still check on the status of the case as well. Well, tomorrow or Tuesday, you know, sometime this week, because you should be able to contact the courts and find out what the status is, the clerks, to see whether anything's been changed. Because yes, you did what you did, but we also know what they do too. So
yeah,
that was just perfect. The whole, like I said, the stuff that you found out in a very, very short period of time, Mark, I'm just awed by how much you've found out, both you and Lisa, how far you've come, and how powerful that information obviously in bringing you to where you are today. Because 3 years of shit and drudgery dealing with the crap that they've been throwing at you, that on its own would be enough to floor most people. But what is it now, 5-6 weeks maybe since you kind of first came to the show?
Yeah, since well, I think you did 2 shows before, or 1 show, no, 2 shows before I came on, and it was only since, I mean, I did a lot of, you know, what the law is and what's lawful and what's legal. And it's just since the 28th of April, I said, I'm having none of this, because it was day in, day out on the internet, because we had 1 solicitor. By the way, ladies and gents, we had 3 solicitors and 2 barristers got her, and they actually paid them off. And we've got proof of that. And their solicitors turn around, their barristers. It needs barristers for these huge corporate companies. Well, it's just the families just beat them all. And that's what I'm more gobsmacked at. So knowledge is power with the action.
Mm-hmm.
And
thank you for adding that.
Yeah, I know. I'll remember that. But the thing is, the more you see it, the more you just want to. I mean, it's like a bug to me. I just want to learn more and more and more. And if I can pass my knowledge on, and people do their own work to find out what's going on, it will blow everything out of proportion. I mean, things will change radically, and in fact, things are changing. So within 4 months, we've gone from not too sure to 100% positive we're going to do this. Worked. And
like I say, that to me, is one of the best examples of finding out who you are and standing in your own power and having the guts to stand up to the system, to stand up to the perceived authority. Because when you challenge them with the facts and you challenge them in honor, and you stand in your honor, they have no defense. They can't operate that way.
That's true.
We do know how deceitful they are, so I would certainly be very wary of what they may do after this, because realistically, I think there must be. I would file an actual motion for the case itself, you know, and show that it's the case closed based on the abandonment of the court. Otherwise, it's kind of left open as far as the file is concerned. Just maybe a little suggestion, maybe where to go on that one, just to finalize it and make sure that it is closed. But yeah, I mean, everything you described there is exactly how we should operate and how we should stand. And anybody listening, anybody who listens to this later, it just goes to show that, you know, knowledge with action is power. So much so that you operate from a completely different state once you realize that. And I'm sure, Mark and Lisa, you feel so empowered right now, and especially after that fact, that you right now you're living in a different state than you were before.
We're on a different planet, to tell you the truth, because of all that. But it's true what he said. I mean, when the authorities start on you, especially a judge, and start mouthing off at you, I stepped in straight away. I said, "Excuse me, but you have no domineering over us, right, whatsoever. We're all made equal, right?" And he didn't like that one bit. Well, it just goes to prove that is wrong.
Yeah, there's lots of people out there who bring up, you know, you're a slave, you're this, you're that. They have, you know, this how to circumvent authority. Authority is an illusion, first of all. There's other than the universe. I call it the universe. It encompasses nature, whatever you view as God or the source or whatever. I mean, there is authority there. You are going to expire at some point and move on. So there is an inherent authority in nature, but for one man to have authority over another is an absolute illusion. They've either got an agreement or they've got force, and that's the only way they're going to get authority. They can make you agree. They can trick you into it. They can coerce you into it. They can blackmail you into it. They can extort you into it. But they have to get your agreement. They have to get you to go, okay, you have authority. Or they point a gun at your head and say, wash my floor. For one of Rob Menard's perfect examples. And yeah, you know, unless you're willing to let go of your experience here, then somebody pointing a gun at you is going to give them force of authority, not inherent authority. So it's totally illusory. It doesn't actually exist. Mark, you've seen this now with your own eyes, that these people are just people. And they really have nothing that you don't actually give them yourself. And when we're talking about know who you are, we're talking about know the difference between fact and fiction. Know the difference between the inherent and the contract. If you have to agree to it, it's a contract. Harm, loss, or damage, common law, basic stuff. Really simple to grasp, really easy. If it causes harm, it causes loss, it causes damage, or it deals with fraud in any way, it's common law, period. So it's that simple. And the common law is the superior law. It overrides every other system of law out there, whether it's Admiralty, Napoleonic, Sharia law. I can't even think of half of them. I know there's a number of them out there. And the common law, because it deals with harm, loss, or damage, is the superior law, always. And you want to be in common law jurisdiction. You want to make sure that regardless of what these people claim, what jurisdiction they claim, they are bound by common law. Otherwise, they can cause you harm, and it doesn't matter. They don't care. And they're not answerable for it. When you claim common law jurisdiction, they are now answerable for any harm, loss, or damage they cause in a complete 100% personal liability. Personal liability, not a corporate liability, not a fictional liability. They are personally liable. Their body is on the line if they screw up. And that's why this judge refused to recognize common law, because he would not take responsibility for his actions. Because you have to. If you're living in common law, you are 100% responsible for your actions. This is why he wouldn't do it.
Yeah, if I wanted to go back to that as well, important statement that he made, the judge, as Mark relayed it, he said, "I do not recognize common law." Now, did he say common law in this court, Mark, or did he just say, "I do not recognize common law"? I just wanted to clarify.
Sorry, Carl, just put it. No, he says, what he say? Yeah, he said, "I don't recognise jurisdiction."
Okay, so he said, "I don't recognize common law jurisdiction," but that to me basically says that he is not giving the authority of common law. He's not recognizing it. He's not seeing it, which is exactly the same state that I say when I send mail back, and I simply state addressee not recognized. It's the same legal definition, the same legal status, that you are not responding, you are not recognizing, you are not acknowledging the name in this case, or in the common law jurisdiction, he's not acknowledging the jurisdiction of common law. And because he can do that, it becomes ignored in the court. The only way that you can force that is, as you did, and you stood firm, and you told him that the jurisdiction has to and must be established in any kind of court case. And you wanted common law jurisdiction to be supreme in this court. That's when, of course, he bowed out and said, "I'm done. I can't force that issue," because you called him on it. He said, "I don't recognize it." If you'd have said, "Okay, you're done" at that point, but you didn't. You stood up and said, "No, we have a right to establish jurisdiction and we want common law jurisdiction." He tried, he failed, he left the court. That was basically, in my view, what happened.
Yeah, Mia put a link to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in the chat, and I feel the need to point out that that document, that body of words, is a guideline. It's nothing more. It has no authority. The only rights you have are the ones you claim. You have to claim it. If you don't claim it, somebody else will, and they'll make sure that you don't know that you have to claim it. You have to. You don't have rights. You claim rights. That's what rights are. Now, unless you claim it, you don't have the right not to be harmed, because somebody can come along and punch you in the nose. They're going to do it unless you have the position where you say, no, you are not allowed to punch me in the nose. And at that point it becomes, it's not a contract anymore. It becomes a right that you have claimed. I claim the ability to exist without others causing me harm. And that's the only way you get rights. You're not given rights. You can be ascribed rights, but it's not you that's being ascribed the rights. It's your person.
Mm-hmm. I think Mark established something else as well with bailiffs when he went into the first court. He didn't describe at that point what he did to establish that common law jurisdiction with bailiffs, and I didn't want to interrupt him, so I just let that flow. Mm-hmm. But I'm of the opinion that he basically told the bailiffs and the security people there that I'm under a common law jurisdiction, and my claim is above the courts, and I do not give you permission to touch me, which he could have said in open court as well by turning, I do not give any of you security any permission to touch me at all, and anybody who does so, I will personally take action against them to either defend myself if it's to that extent, or if I am harmed, I will then seek action against you for damages. So telling them as well, making sure that you tell them and notify them is another way of establishing exactly who you are and who they are and how they should operate and act.
Well, it's crucial,
and I guess I've seen that a lot. I've seen that a lot in court situations, because if you don't say it, presumption still remains that they have the power to do what they want and touch you, until you turn around and said, no, you don't have the power. I'm here under a common jurisdiction. My right is supreme, and if you touch me, I will defend myself. I am warning you now. I have the right to defend myself. You stay away, and if I am harmed, then I will come after you personally and take legal action against you.
Well, lawful action.
Lawful action against you. Which will obviously mean that you might lose your house, you might lose your pension, you might lose everything. So think before you act.
Yeah. To illustrate the power of this, a friend of mine, he lives in the Lower Mainland. He's a manager of an apartment complex in the town that he's in. He has a sign. Front door of his apartment, you open his front door and you've got a 4-foot little tiny bit of a hallway and then a big closet door. So as soon as you open the door, you're not looking directly into his living room, you're looking at this closet door. And posted right on the closet door, right eye level, he's got a piece of paper that he's printed out that says, this is a common law jurisdiction. He's got that posted right on his closet door inside of his house. This one day he was having some issues, and the police showed up, and this one lady cop, Mike was, usually he goes outside, closes his door, he speaks with them outside, and in this instance, this lady cop wanted to come into the house to talk to Mike, and Mike's like, sure, no problem, yeah, come on in, come and sit down, and he opens the door and he walks in. She tries to walk in right after him, and she sticks her foot through the threshold of the door, and before it hits the floor, she sees the sign. She stops immediately, takes her foot back, puts it outside of the door, and would not cross the threshold. Absolutely refused to walk into Mike's house because it's a common law jurisdiction. She is personally liable for her actions, and she knew it. This is when you make this known. It's a tremendous amount of power, and it gives you a tremendous amount of authority over these actors, because the cops are actors, the judges are actors. They are filling a role in a play, in a script that doesn't actually exist. And it's only because people don't realize it doesn't exist. They don't realize that it's entirely a fiction that they get away with it. When you assert your common law jurisdiction as the supreme law, it takes all of their presumed authority away. That came up earlier, the concept of presumed authority, and I used the term assumed authority, which, looking at it from one perspective, they are assuming that they have authority. So it is assumed authority. From the perspective of the person who's getting slapped down, it would be a presumed authority. So, yeah, they're both correct. They're just from two different points of view. Incredibly powerful stuff. Mark, you did it. You did it. That's all I can say is you got it. You understand what's going on. You know how to end this. And as you said, the biggest thing is jurisdiction. If you question jurisdiction and they refuse to answer those questions, it's done. It's over. It's finished. They cannot move forward at that point, not even by their own rules. They'll try, most certainly, because that's the script. They've been doing it. Nobody's bothered questioning them so long that when they question it, they don't really realize what's going on. So sometimes you really have to, assert yourself. The more people that do it.
Be aware of the 7 elements of jurisdiction.
Exactly.
Because those elements, all of those elements have to apply for them to have jurisdiction. Not, you look through the list and that one applies, so I have jurisdiction. That's not the way it works. All 7 must apply. And if they don't, then they don't have jurisdiction.
That's right. The 7 elements of jurisdiction and the 12 assumptions of court. Those were the first 2 things that we talked about on when this show first started out. And if you
show 1 and show 2,
if you question any one of those 19 things and can show cause that this is incorrect, then you end the problem. It's gone. It's over. Now, granted, if you are in a contract knowingly, willingly, and intentionally, and you breach that contract, you will answer for it because that's the way it is. That's an honorable thing to do. If you're in a assumed contract or one that you're not even aware of, I didn't sign anything, I didn't agree to anything, any of this stuff, then you have the ability to claim the right to say no. This is not accurate. This is not true. This is not real. I am not responsible for this. I am not liable for this or culpable for this even in some cases, because in some cases you breach a contract, you actually are causing harm. And if it's a contract that you had no idea even existed, how can you be held culpable for breaching that contract? I think
there was a phrase that got used and I don't know whether you agree with it or not, because I have some reservations, but when you use the phrase, there has been a mistake, that can sometimes hold great sway because they do recognize a mistake as something in law that they can deal with.
Yep.
So that's a possibility too.
Yeah. I mean, Mark he's an ex-Special Forces paratrooper, I think, if I remember right. Military training, the kind of guy you don't want to piss off because he's going to respond. He will respond. I can hear it in his voice. He's a lot calmer now than he was probably 20 years ago, but a lot of people aren't there. So if they get this vitriol thrown at them, this massive anger, hate energy thrown at them, they don't know how to deal with it very well. So staying as calm and as peaceful and as pleasant as possible is really, really important. Because if you get angry, if you get upset, then you drop right into their game, and because they know how to deal with that. They know how to make you do things at that point. One thing that came up while you were telling your story, Mark, is when the judge says, "I don't recognize common law jurisdiction," what came up in my mind is the response, "Well, then I don't recognize you," which basically puts this exactly the same thing he's trying to do to you onto him. So now he has to claim that he has authority, you have to claim that you have common law jurisdiction, and it's a way to avoid the slight little bit of conflict that came up. I mean, you'd handled it masterfully. I'm very impressed. Some people wouldn't be able to do that. So an alternative to that would be, if they say, "I don't recognize common law," well, I don't recognize you. And again, using their tools, using their little games in a way that they're not prepared to deal with. And you know from your own experience that when you use those tools in a way they're not prepared to deal with, they fall apart. The stuffing comes out. And it's actually kind of fun to watch.
Well, I'm sure there were people in that courtroom. I hope this video, because their faces must have been an absolute picture.
Well, probably not. I mean, the TPUC guys basically did that. Went in and told the judge he's not a judge. He has no authority. You're just could be some just drunk they pulled off the street. Who cares? And they got video of that. And they went in looking for a fight, and they got a fight. Mark, you went in looking for resolution to very serious questions. You didn't get the resolution, and at that point you were able to say, well, since you're not going to resolve these problems, this is over. Basically, really simply. So awesome. Kudos to you, buddy. You did really well.
I mean, the main tool that really put him, over the edge was saying, is that civil or criminal contempt? Because he didn't know what to do. He didn't expect that. And that's when he literally stood up, sort of shook and bowed and left, and abandoned the court.
At that moment, he realized, you guys know what you're talking about, and he is not going to get away with this. That's why he left.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, he'd tried everything. He literally tried everything. We'd pre-warned him. We'd written to him all that week and stated, that you have to jurisdiction. I personally challenge you as the district judge to prove jurisdiction. Now, he ignored every letter that went to him over the past few months and still carried on regardless. He was just going to pass down his judgment, which was unlawful. He'd lie completely throughout it. And, he had no intention of justice whatsoever. He just wanted to hide the truth and basically give the claimants what they wanted because of his pecuniary interest in the controlling company.
Yeah, what I've seen talking to a number of people who have gone through this stuff and got to the point where they get threatened with contempt of court, that always appears to be the last resort for the judge or for these presumed judges. That's the last thing they can do to try to coerce you into accepting what they want to do to you. And when that falls apart, it's done. It's over, because they don't have anything after that. They have no more tools. They're threatened to put you in jail, and they have no.
Well, I mean, the only person that was in contempt of that day was him because he lied.
Well, well, no, there was no contempt at all, because first of all, you had no contract with these people.
No, okay.
So there was no civil contempt. He didn't actually cause you harm, so there was no criminal contempt. You see, the contempt of court doesn't mean that you have no respect for the court. It means that you've either breached a contract with the court, or your actions are causing harm to a participant in the court.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's actually to the court, not to the judge, because the judge you're supposed to be open to this stuff. You know, you can't injure. Well, no, let's backtrack that a little bit. The judge himself is supposedly outside this and cannot be affected. He is supposedly the arbiter of the decision-making process within that courtroom. So if there's any contempt or anything that goes against the court, it's literally the court and the people or persons within it. The judge himself cannot be affected by any of that under the legal or the legal system. That's the way it's supposed to work anyway.
Well, I mean, the judge is still liable for his actions, and this is why he
in the common law.
Well, this is why common law is everywhere. It doesn't matter whether it's an admiralty court. Common law still applies.
Yeah, but you have to tell him that is going to be his decisions and his actions. If you don't, then he's going to act under the maritime and commercial courts. In which case, he has no liability. He can do and say exactly what the fuck he wants. Excuse the French.
Yep. Well, anything you do not assert in those systems, it is assumed that you have waived it.
Mm-hmm.
So same thing with common law. If you don't assert common law, it is assumed within Admiralty that you have waived common law. It still applies. But if you agree to waive it, then you can no longer be protected by it. If you agree to speak for the fiction, you can no longer walk away. If you agree to be surety for the fiction, you can no longer pass that on to someone else. This is how Admiralty works. It's all contract. The common law is assertion. Admiralty law is contract. I don't know how to make it any simpler than that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know we've got quite a few people at the... Does anybody have any particular questions about the process, something that they're not sure of that they want, John or I to clarify? If it's quicker and easier, we've got about 20 minutes, I think. So if it's quicker and easier, just put your hand up kind of thing, or just say, do you want to come in and ask the question rather than type it, or type it if you prefer. Damn, we're good.
Oh man, I get so nervous when this happens. We're not that good. I'd say these people are good because they get it. And well, I mean, half of these folks, we're preaching to the choir, because half of these folks already know this stuff, and they're in because, I don't know, maybe we're just funny. But there is a couple of new people here. There's Kiki's new. Megan, I think you've only been here a couple of times. Tara, you've just recently come back online. You were on there for a while and disappeared, and now it seems you're back. Come on out, say hi to everybody, and let us know what's going on. And I'm sure you have something to say about this.
Yeah, and shy.
We got one person in. If we don't put the 3 dots. If that doesn't come in, to put a name in so that we know you're actually a person and who you are. Otherwise, I'm going to remove you from the channel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure whether that was anything to do with maybe the chat from the RTS site. Not even sure how that works.
No, it's not a bot. It's an actual person.
Yeah. Oh, well. I mean, any of the questions actually have to relate to what it is that we've just been discussing. Go back to what we were discussing earlier. If there was something you wanted to say about that, by all means. Oh, it's Dino. Okay. No. Dino's Dino. I know. He's been around forever. And no, I'm not going to accept anybody coming in with a number for a name. Put in your name. Let us know who you are. 3
3 dots doesn't fly, I'll kick you out of the channel.
Yeah. Okay. Did you just kick, or did they
Yes, I
just
did.
leave?
I kicked him out.
Okay. Okay. Well, if they,
I mean, they're not banned. They can come back in, but I'm just letting everybody know, if you're going to advertise the channel, if you're going to tell people about it, let them know. Be who you are. You don't waste your time hiding, because we're not even going to talk to you. If we don't know who you are, bye. Take responsibility for yourself.
Yeah.
John is implacable.
Okay, well, I know Brianna she must have something to say. Brianna's been incredibly quiet.
Well, I mean, Brianna's, where she lives, the law is weird, and I do not understand it.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, yeah, it's not relevant. I can't have personal question, although I've been subject to bullshit here by courts. But I can't have questions because, yes, our law is completely all through the show, and it's not the first time. I was trying to put into the Romanian language and the Romanian law system the little I know or I've experienced of it, and I could not. I mean, it would take a lawyer, and I was actually honestly thinking, managed to put my hand, so to speak, to find, an open-minded, decent Romanian lawyer who would listen to your shows. That would be amazing, because he might or she might grasp and then maybe find a way. Because, I mean, admiralty laws, obviously, it's all over the fucking world, or the so-called free world, which we as a country are part of now, because they had all the Romanian laws remodeled after the West European laws, French law mostly. And there's the famous, EU laws that overrule any member country law, blah, blah, blah. So basically, it should work here as well, because we are under the fucking EU thing and the fucking Western laws, which are admiralty.
Well, Brianna,
now,
the concept of common law, the concept of do no harm, cause no loss or damage, and use no fraud in contracts still applies. It may come under a different heading. It may come under a different label, but that's still going to be the superior. That's still going to be the superior law within that system.
Right. It's superior anywhere on this planet.
That's right.
In this universe, actually. But my problem was really trying to put the wording in Romanian. I was literally listening to Mark, who's amazingly, inspiring to listen to a real story that happened. And I was trying to put the words literally into Romanian. So, again, I would love to be able at some point to bring in a Romanian person of whichever sex there are, who has knowledge, listen to your shows, to be familiar with your concepts, and then let them try to do something. Because there are people fighting the system out here, but they're doing it under their laws. They're not grasping the difference. They're maybe not aware of this.
I think as a suggestion, look for the retired folk, because folks that are still in the system, that are still licensed, they're under contract, and they get slammed big time if they poke the system in the eye. So look for one that's disgruntled, who's left the system, or somebody who's retired, who they have no stake in it anymore. And if you could find a retired JP, that's perfect, because JP, our Justice of the Peace, is common law. That's the actual lawful common law judge, is a Justice of the Peace.
But the problem is, I don't even know what the fuck a Justice of the Peace would be here. I don't even know if we have those.
Okay. Okay.
But good point, though.
Yeah, sorry for kicking you out, Tara, but it came up as 3 dots I had no idea who you were. I didn't know if you were NSA or FBI or somebody who's going to come in and cause problems. So,
okay, I don't know what's happened. It shows as normal to me, but it has changed. They have changed the app. It does look different in the last couple of days. So I don't know if it's that, whether some update has happened, but
yeah. Well, it's correct now. It's come up now with your username.
Okay. Okay, maybe I just needed to go out and come back in again. Oh, okay, fine.
So.
Okay.
So glad that got straightened out.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, as far as like there's the Napoleonic system is weird. I never researched it. I never really looked at it. It's kind of a bizarre system. But it's, again, like I said, it's even though you may have Sharia law or Napoleonic law or whatever, the common law, the concept of harm, loss, or damage is paramount. It always is the superior law. It doesn't matter what system you're working with. So,
putting it into words that people here can understand, so they can understand the concept, because they have no clue. There has to be a beginning, right? The first awakening, the first spark is explaining, and I'm still looking for ways to explain that in this fucking language.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I think you guys even had, because there was somebody that comes in from time to time and listens to the shows who has a nickname who sounds like a Romanian name. And
okay.
Next time I should do what you did to dogs. It's just jump, poor guy, jump on him, quote unquote, and ask him, are you Romanian? And if you are, can you, because I'd really like to put this into explainable, understandable way. When you explain it in English, it's 3 times for some people like me, but you get it.
Unfortunately, I don't speak Romanian or French or any other language. I have a hard enough time just speaking English, and
tell me about it.
80% of the time it doesn't work. I have to use 300 words to describe something that's just a simple concept, and it drives me nuts because the language is not sufficient. Yeah, I think once you get the concepts down, once you have a grasp of the nuts and bolts of what you're doing, the words will come. I'm sure they exist in the language. And not to say that you don't know the language well enough to come up with the words, but you may not understand the concepts well enough to be able to translate it into the pictures that those words.
Exactly. I would have 1,000 questions to you and Carl, and it would make you lose time, which is unnecessary. Whereas a lawyer, good idea on the old disgruntled one, would get it because he would know exactly. He would immediately. Whereas I'm not Swiss cheese brain. Plus, I'm into. I'm so much more into what you were talking about the first part of the show.
Yeah.
And all this, common law thing is should happen, exist, and should be applied, and should be demanded and asserted by everybody.
Most definitely. I mean, don't worry about asking us. Don't worry about asking us questions, Brianna. If you want to learn this stuff and be able to bring this out to the people in your area, by all means, get a hold of us, talk to us, ask us questions. We will do our best to try to clarify for you.
To find disgruntled, like you said, because it would be easiest, fastest, and I'm fucking lazy. I mean, I'll admit it.
Okay, well, you can have your ice cream and sit in the sun. That's okay.
I mean, we're aiming for what we like to do, right?
Yeah, do what your passion drives you to do. If it's not law, don't try to jump into it. If it's if your passion is gardening, garden.
I think that's where we're all looking at right now is delve into your passions, find out what your passions. Learning about the system is what John and I, have spent the last 10 to 15 years doing. It's not our passion anymore. Telling you guys what we've learned is our passion. You know, and much more than that. That's what our passion is, and everything's changing. Now it's all about, you know, not being selfish, but it's about living our lives and achieving the happiness and the joy that has been sadly lacking in many of our lives for many different reasons. Now the whole point is to turn it around and not live that life anymore. Seek out the happiness, seek out the joy, seek out the love, let it find you. Maybe you're putting blocks up to stop it from finding you, but that's what it's all about in my view now. Yep. So yeah, I mean, if your joy is becoming teaching people about the law, that's fine, but you also have to go through the process of learning it too. Right now, that's not really a joyful process, believe me.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about Mark could probably say the other way around. He's had a ton of fun going through this stuff.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I think his was very specific as well. I think what Brianna, is potentially trying to do is a bit too all-encompassing. Maybe, you know, if there's something to focus on, that's fine. But you know, we've been all over the place. We've been all through all the rabbit holes, the beaver dens, and you know, badger huts, whatever. You know, we've been all over.
Well, so, I
feel called to bridge people to grasp your concept and carry it forward, because it could be, and it will be very useful to the people here as well, people everywhere. I don't feel called to do it because I laugh when I say I'm too lazy. My calling is somewhere else. And trying to even talk about law, plus I have a few traumas that are linked to courts. I literally have the hives if I have to get anywhere near a courtroom. But that's personal trauma. But it's like, when I say lazy, I mean calling is somewhere else. The calling is not to do that. But I see how important it is, and I would love it to be done for the Romanian people as well. I know I can't do it because I fucking can't do it.
Yeah, I can definitely see a need for this information in Eastern Europe. I mean, I don't know how accurate it is, but the stories that we get in North America concerning Eastern Europe, it makes this little bit of slavery that we're attempted to be subject to here look ridiculous. And some of the things that you've discussed, Brianna, it's I couldn't live that way. I couldn't be in that kind of a system where there's, you know, every time you go to walk down the street to go to the store, and you've got to pass 9 guys with guns who are licensed to shoot you if they feel like it. They don't even have to do anything. They can just off you.
Wait. Chill. That's not Romania. It's not that bad.
Well, I understand. I'm generalizing.
Bad, yeah.
You know,
the corruption is worse because you have a mix of the old oligarchic communism that has embraced the whatever you want to call it, neocon, neo-lib, which is the same shit, which is horrible shit. They embraced it with all their might because they loved it, because it allowed them to continue their oligarchic system,
yep,
their corruption, their crap, on an almost legal, they feel vulnerable now. Whereas before, they were afraid of the party because there was still some kind of retribution if you were caught. They had to make an example of you. Now they don't, they get caught red-handed stealing public money, all the shit. And they don't give a shit. They go to jail for a month, they write a book, they come out. That's
I mean,
so it's more of a personal. That's me because I'm a fucking dissident. And it's the way I chose to speak up. Okay, that's personal.
Yeah, I brought it up. I brought it up from, partly from the perspective of some of the people that I've worked with. I worked with folks from Eastern Germany, from the Ukraine, from Czechoslovakia.
Exaggerate. I will tell you that we do love to exaggerate, but there is a lot of truth to it. But we love to exaggerate also. It's like, we talked about actually. Remember about the people, from here, aiming for the American dream because it was something like, oh, that's the ultimate freedom. I want to go there and I want to make money, and they, without unknowingly, the lion's den. They were fleeing something they thought was horrible, i.e., here, and going for something that was just a glittery Hollywood lie. The American or North American or Western European dream, which is a big lie.
Well, to access the American dream, to access the American dream, you got to be asleep.
Even that, it was vaguely accessible between the 50s and 80s, and when they started the whole Reaganism and the trickle-down economy, that went to shit. Because the middle class is sort of fearing, so forget it.
Yeah.
Work anymore. There will be no more jobs. In this type economy as it is constructed now, jobs are going to disappear, purely and simply.
Yep. I mean, when I was doing tool and die making, doing my 4th year apprenticeship, they told me you're in a really good position. You picked a good one. There's going to be jobs for years. There's like we're predicting, 4 to 5 jobs for every tool maker for the next 10 to 20 years. And now 15 years later, after I left the industry, there's basically no tool makers left. Nobody is doing the work. It's all overseas. So, yeah, I mean...
China now.
I mean, it's
either roboticized or taken overseas for slave labor. Amazon is currently... Oh, guys, by the way, everybody listening, for fuck's sakes, please boycott stuff like Amazon. I know it's convenient, but fucking boycott those places. Stop buying from them. They're slave owners, literally. People commit suicide that work there. The conditions, the pressure they put, the peer pressure, everything. It's absolutely horrendous. So anyway, Amazon is, for instance, there's going to be a lot of Amazon jobs, people that have jobs at Amazon US, losing them because Amazon is fucking building a huge compound here in Romania. Why? Because it's still less expensive than robots to pay Romanian wages. They'll throw like €100 a month, at some poor dude who will be proud to work for such a big brand as Amazon. And that's going to work for a little bit. Then they'll robotize that too, and those jobs will be gone. So.
Yeah, well...
the system is fucked.
Oh, most definitely. It's also falling apart at the seams, and very soon we won't even need to worry about that. So I'm not concerned about that sort of stuff. In the interim, the little while it's going to take to get people over the concept that I have to work for a living to the idea that I can build a living. We can help each other. We can get through it. It's not going to be that big a deal.
Yes. I'm glad you're bringing that up because I do feel there will be a need for topics. If you and Carl are going to be willing to bring them up, well, hey, fantastic. The topic of like what you call the interim period, the period where there will be a need for people to be helped redirecting because they will be completely disoriented.
Yep.
There will be a disorientation.
I'm going to wait until mid-October to bring that up. I need to wait and see what's going to happen with what Heather's doing down in the States right now. Because that, from my perspective, from what I see and what I know over the last whack of years, this is the pivotal point. This is the time when the concepts that we have been looking at for the last 4 or 5 years, as far as money and economy and the source of funds, the need of funds, that's going to be tested. And depending upon what occurs during that test, we may need to reinforce the concepts or we may need to move way past them into how do we actually implement this stuff. So yes, that is going to come out, but it's going to be, a few weeks from now, closer to the middle end of October, when I actually see what's going on with the OPPT filings and how that plays out. Because if that plays out the way we expect it to, then money is irrelevant. Every single person on the planet has more money than they know what to do with. Nobody has to earn a living. It's finished. And we'll see what happens. I can't even predict what's going to happen. I mean, Heather is supremely confident. And we are moving there. We are going to get there eventually. But I don't really want to jump into that conversation prematurely, because then you get labeled as a hopium artist or a hopium dealer. And I want to be able to give people stuff they can immediately sink their teeth into. So
okay, you're right. Let's just put it this way.
It's a process in flux right now.
That's right.
It's collapsing.
All right.
Be, blah, blah, blah.
Well, changing rather than collapsing.
Yeah.
Or trying to, which it is trying to.
I mean,
implement a new, whatever the funds.
I mean, the concept of infinite funds. The concept of infinite funds already exists. It's already in the legislation. It's in the rules now. Anybody should be able to go to a bank, fill out a promissory note, sell it to the bank, get their cash, and go and do whatever they want to do. Period. It's done. It's over. It's a conversion of one species of money to another. That's how a mortgage works. That's how a car loan works. But they wrap it in deceptive language, thinking that, or making you think you have to pay it back. So they actually get paid twice. They get paid once when you hand them your species of money in the form of a promissory note, which they hand you back to you in other promissory notes. And then they make you give back all those promissory notes. So the idea of having this incredible abundance is already there. We just have to finalize it. We have to make it, we have to challenge it and get it a precedent. And once the precedent is set, it'll just flow from that point on. Yeah, if that happens, it'll be a huge test.
and we get to that point. So let's agree on not to call it hopium, because that is not hopium. I'm talking about how to deal with the end of money. I'm talking how to help people, completely transition from the way of life to that topic.
Yep.
That topic, in my view, is not hopium. It's actually being prepared. It's preparing.
Yes. Oh no, it's inevitable.
I think what we started the show with is a lot to do with how you deal with what's coming, because you're going to be operating at a different level. And if you can operate in that level of thinking and feeling, then any transition that takes place in this system isn't really going to affect you. Not to the same extent that it's going to affect others. So yeah, we have to change the way people think, the way people feel, and how they perceive their future and their existence. Once they can do that, then they can leave all the negative aspects of emotions that many people are living amongst, because that's their life. They have no joy, they have no happiness, they have no future. And it's not through the want of it, and it's not happening. They are quite happy to exist in that environment. So, we really have to look at how to change the way they're thinking. The people like me who realized I had lost my joy and had lost my direction, I was looking for it, and it found me. And I'm quite happy about that, I'll tell you.
Yep. And that, my friends, is the crux of the conversation. So, Brianna, I'd hate to cut you off, but I got stuff I got to do. And
I was just congratulating Carl. Come on, give me a half a second.
Okay,
Carl,
go ahead.
I'm really, really, really happy for you. I love you. I love you, Tara. This is amazing. There, John, I'm done.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Brianna. We can talk after the show.
Yeah, thanks everybody. I'd love to keep going, but I got stuff I got to get done, and so this is the crux of what's coming. Life is changing. Life is changing in a big way, in a very dramatic way, and pretty soon, all of the stuff we're talking about is going to be not only second knowledge but irrelevant because everybody will be living it. So, on that note, thank you very much, Carl. Thanks everybody for coming in and typing stuff in the chat and being here and listening to us. That's why we do it. And we'll talk to you all next week.
Yeah, thank you again, John. Appreciate you producing as usual, being co-host. Thanks for everybody for tuning in to us. It's so much fun. And yep, we'll see you all next week, I hope, for a bigger audience and a better subject or a greater subject. Yep, love you all. Take care, guys.
Bye-bye, folks.